In lesson 7-3, we're going to estimate using fractions. We're also going to estimate using 10%. So, first of all, 51% is really close to 1/2. So we're going to do 1/2 of 130 because we're estimating. So get those into easier numbers to work with. And then half of 130 is 65. Okay, and so we like to say it's about 65, so if we use these kind of squiggly equal signs, that means the same thing as saying about 65. 23% is really close to 1/4. 1/4 would be 25%. So we can round that to 1/4 of 8. And I would leave that as 8 because we want it to be divisible by 4, because since it's a fraction, we're going to be dividing by 4. So 1/4 of 8 is about 2. So that would be our answer there. And then 32.9%, the fraction closest to 32.9% is actually 1/3. So 1/3 of 90, and 90 is divisible by 3. So we can say 1/3 of 90 is about 30. Okay, and just do 90 divided by 3. Alright, the next examples we'll be talking about using the 10% method. Okay, so we're still estimating, but using 10%. Now when you find 10% of a number, you basically just move the decimal point one spot to the left. So for example, 10% of 72 we would say is 7.2. Just move the decimal one spot to the left. If I have 163, 10% of 163 is 16.3. So it's pretty easy to find 10% of a number, and then if you find a multiple of 10%, you just multiply it by whatever that is. So you're going to want to round all your percents to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, or 90%. And so if you're going to find 30%, like in this first problem, I'm going to find 30% of 80. First thing you want to do is find 10%, so we move the decimal one spot to the left. So 10% of 80 is 8, but we want 30%, so then we got to multiply by 3. So 3 times 8 is about 24. Okay? Next example, 62%. So again, we're going to say 60% of, and we can make this 15, be a little bit closer than saying 10. So again, 10% of 15 is 1.5. Or again, to find 10% of a number, you just move the decimal one spot to the left. And then we got to multiply by 6. So you can either do 6 times 1.5, or if you think of 1.5 as $1.50, 2 of those would be $3, 4 of those would be 6, and 6 of those would be $9. So we say 60% of 15 is about 9. Alright, so 77%, so we're going to round that to 80% of 30. Okay, so again, find 10% of 30 by moving the decimal. 10% of 30 is 3, and then we got to multiply by 8, because 10% is 3, so 80% would be 8 times that, which is about 24. Okay, so 77% of 28 is about 24. Concerts. A town sold 407 tickets to a chamber music concert in the town square. Of the tickets sold, 61% were discounted for senior citizens. About how many senior citizens bought tickets for the concert? Alright, so we're going to say that 61%, we're going to round that to 60% of, and we're going to change 407 to just 400. So again, if we find 10% of 400, move the decimal one spot to the left, and then we're going to do 6 times 40, so that would be 240 tickets. Alright, so that's a good estimate there for 61% of 407 is about, you always want to say about for estimate problems, about 240 tickets. Alright, now these last three are a little bit different, so we'll give you a couple examples here. If I find 231% of 54, I'm going to actually round that to 230% of 50. Alright, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find 200% of that number, and then I'm going to find 30%. I'm going to kind of break it up. Okay, so 100% of any number is the same number. So 100% of 50 is 50. So 200% of 50 is 100. And then 30% of 50, again, if I move the decimal one spot, I find 10%. So 10% of 50 is 5. So 30% would be 3 times 5, or 15. And then if I just add these two together, I have 115, which is my total. All right, for this one, this is less than 1%. So 1/4 of a percent of 800. Okay, now, I don't want you to actually round this to 1%. I want you to leave it as 1/4 of a percent. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to find 1%. Now, 10%, whenever you find 10%, you're going to move the decimal one spot to the left. So when you find 1%, you're going to move it 2 spots to the left. Okay, so I'm going to write that over here. I'm going to say 10%, move 1 spot left, and then 1%, you move 2 spots left. Alright, so 1% of 800 is 8, but we don't want 1%, we want 1/4 of 1%, so we got to do 8 divided by 4, which is about 2. Okay, now this one is, I'm going to leave it at 0.5%, and I'm going to say of 90. Again, since this is less than 1%, I'm going to find 1%. Okay, 1% of 90 is 0.9, so that's like 90 cents, and half of 90 cents would be 45 cents. So 0.5% of 87 is about 0.45. So again, we did estimating using fractions, we did estimating using the 10% method, and then this last page gives us a few examples of fractions and greater than 100% estimations. So please use your notes to help you with your assignment.